Okay, good morning. I'm Adam Finkel from the University of Pennsylvania Law School, but I am not speaking to you as a lawyer because I am not one, environmental health science. This is an unusual one because it's not one specific change in a law or policy, but a program of changes in a particular type. Scott and Heidi and the others asked me to reprise one I did last year on inaccuracy in food labeling, and I decided rather than bend your ears again about that specific one, I would embed it in a general discussion of disclosure. And I'm going to focus on two areas, again, the safe and healthy food and safe workplaces, but I encourage you to think about your own public health areas. I talk about the general issue of the accuracy of disclosures. So this issue of smart disclosure is being touted as the next wave. We used to know it as right to know, but it's come back again as smart disclosure. The behavioral economics community is all for it. The president's regulatory czar, who just left the administration, Cass Sunstein, is big on this issue. It's touted as a favorable alternative to regulation because it empowers consumers to make smart choices, it empowers workers to make smart choices, all of which sounds good, but what if, and I'm going to try and convince you that's not an if, but a reality, the disclosures are some combination of misleading, inaccurate, incomplete, and completely missing in action. So I'm going to talk about those three types of misleading disclosures. So first, inaccurate. Last year I talked about the so-called coffee mate loophole, where FDA allows any constituent of a nutrition label that is present in less than 1/2 a gram per serving to be rounded down to 0. So of course all manufacturers have to do is farcically create small serving sizes, and then 0.49 grams of something like trans fat can become 0. And so I think this is a debasement of algebra. 225 times 0.49 does not equal 0. And think about this in your daily lives as you go home today. A 90-minute flight that arrives in 2 hours is not an early arrival. It's a debasement of flight arrival times. The same thing is going on here. Incomplete disclosure. I commend to your attention a report from a group called the Mercury Policy Project last September. No one in the decades had thought to test not small supermarket cans of tuna fish, but the large institutional packages that school children eat. It's pretty good news. It turns out that the mercury content of that tuna is not significantly greater than store-bought tuna, except insofar as the solid albacore tuna does seem to be higher in mercury in the big packages. But again, that's the most vulnerable population, and the actual testing has not really been done on the kind of tuna fish that young children eat. If I have time, I'll go back and give you an anecdote from on my way over here on Wednesday. And then an example of missing in action. I used to work at OSHA. It's a hard graph to see on the lower left-hand corner here, but that's a scatter plot of many of the OSHA permissible exposure limits measured against a gold standard of risk, which is the EPA's reference concentration. And so these limits are not just woefully out of date. Most of them are science from the 1960s, so they're not just lax, but they provide zero information to workers about how risky their actual exposures are. A given permissible exposure limit at OSHA could be a factor of 10,000 different from the next one in terms of how much risk is actually being imparted by that level. And no one has ever created a compendium of risk-based limits, even as informational guidance. They exist for the environment, but not for the workplace. So I'm proposing not a change in law, but an executive action, a presidential commission that would be charged with developing a priority list of these health essential disclosures, to review the existing ones for clarity, to work with the agencies that are executive branch agencies to enforce these changes, and to basically direct the Office of Management and Budget to get out of the way and not impose paperwork reduction constraints on collecting good data. It's feasible, it's been done. One example would be the miles per gallon illusion, which the scientists at Duke talked about in Science magazine. A given change in miles per gallon is much more helpful to the environment at the low end, going from 10 to 15 mpg. The real metric should be gallons per mile, and EPA and DOT have started to put gallons per mile on the car label. It's not very prominent, it's not explained very well, but it can be done. I think it's going to be a hard sell because, of course, there are entrenched interests that don't want smart disclosure. On the other hand, both industry and government have an interest in avoiding conflicting and multiple sources of information. My anecdote is on the way over here on Wednesday, I stopped at my local school district to meet with school board and the Sodexo Marriott people about the tuna fish issue, and they were really supremely disinterested in this. So it's, of course, you guys know better than me, a hard sell on the ground. Thank you very much.